This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Fiscally responsible, financial geniuses, monetary magicians. These are things people say about drivers who switch their car insurance to Progressive and save hundreds. Visit Progressive.com to see if you could save. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Potential savings will vary, not available in all states or situations.
It's the 77 WABC News Hour.
Talking the news with Noam Laden.
All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now,
Talking the news with Noam
on 77 WABC.
Yes, that's me, 5 o'clock. Good morning. It is Tuesday, June 24th. Your forecast from the 77 WABC Weather Center. Sunny, hot, humid today. The high going to be 103. Tonight and overnight, clear, low 81. And then Wednesday, sunny. It continues hot, humid, high 97. If you are walking out the door with us right now, 78 and clear in Scarsdale up in Westchester County. 80 and clear in Bloomingdale over in New Jersey. And it's 80 and clear right outside our Midtown studios.
The top 5 at 5.
Con Ed having some issues keeping the power on. It's primary day. Will we see a huge upset? The ceasefire between Iran and Israel has already been broken. Finally, some good news for LIRR riders. Some Bronx construction workers make an interesting find. All right, let's get into it at 5:01. Of course, we don't have to tell you that's really hot because it's already almost 80 degrees at 5:01 in the morning. Is this day 3? Day 3 of the heat wave. Tomorrow, the final day, temperatures go back to normal, so you just got to get through 2 more days. But if you don't have the power on and you can't power that fan or air conditioning, this becomes a much larger story. So New York City already starting to see the impacts from this heat wave. They will always have power issues when the surge and the demand is so high like it has been over the last couple days. So the numbers we're seeing this morning, while they're small, it's still people who don't have the juice flowing. Some 12,000 people across Queens, Staten Island, and Brooklyn don't have power this morning. In one neighborhood in Glen Oaks, Queens, their neighbors saying yesterday was a long day with no AC or fan to turn on.
Why wait for the power to actually go?
I went to Panera Bread and I went to Whole Foods, staying in air-conditioned places, because I just can't bear the heat.
Now, those cooling centers are open. Con Ed taking precautions to avoid wider power outages, reducing voltage to some customers to try to conserve energy in parts of Queens, Brooklyn, Staten Island. They've reduced voltage by 8% to make necessary repairs while easing pressure on the power grid. It's sort of a game. You got to sort of figure out where to give it here, where to take it away from there. So it always seems someone is without. So this was the numbers we had as of last night. Now, the outage map doesn't look like it's been updated. They usually have a pretty updated outage match. But when we look at all the numbers, like 12,000 customers, so it's 8,300 on Staten Island, 1,800 in the Bronx, and about 1,300 in Queens. Now, that number's larger because when I say 1,300 in Queens, that's the places where the power's out, but there's lots of people who potentially live in a fair amount of those places, so those numbers may be higher. So we'll watch this as the morning goes on, but you can imagine how brutal of a night it was for anybody trying to go through it without any way to power a fan or air conditioning. Mayor Adams urging New Yorkers, of course, to take precautions in the extreme heat. As I told you, 103 today, so, just take it easy.
And so we're telling folks, stay indoors if you can, utilize a place where there's an air conditioner, and we are opening our cooling centers. We know that when the weather gets warmer, that is a traditional wave of crime seems to increase. We're going to do everything possible on our ends to make sure that trend does not continue. But we just want New Yorkers to be conscious about the weather.
Now, have you noticed this, if you're up at this early hour? Whenever we go through one of these heat waves, it seems like people are up at all hours. Like, I saw this yesterday as I was driving to work. There was a ton of people out on the streets. This morning again, like way more than usual. Now, maybe it's people who don't have electricity or a fan or whatever it was, but just sort of a strange thing. And then We always get the warnings of people getting sick amid the heat, and we're getting these reports from emergency rooms across the city. They were really busy yesterday with people who had heat exhaustion or heat stroke.
The big thing that I always see that I worry about is people who are passing out or losing consciousness, because obviously that's a very severe form of heat exhaustion or heat stroke.
Yeah, that's one doctor who said he saw a lot of this yesterday.
You start to have altered mental status. Maybe you're confused, repeating yourself, passing out, or just not acting right.
Yes, so he's just warning, that it really happens. People end up in the hospital with heat exhaustion.
We got to look around, look at our neighbors, check on the neighbors who maybe they don't have air conditioning. Maybe they do have to work outside or they don't have a home, and doing what we can to support them.
And then you had this weird, but I have to call it stupid, stupid moment in Paterson, New Jersey yesterday. They held an outdoor high school graduation. And guess what happened? All kinds of people passed out. I mean, who thought that it was a smart move to continue with a high school graduation when it was almost 100 degrees? But sure enough, they did. Outdoor graduation at Hinchcliffe Stadium, which is that stadium in Paterson that they redid recently. 5 high schools in the Paterson area were going to do graduations there. And finally, at some point during the course of the day, they called off some of these graduations, so not everybody got to walk. But people, parents want to see their kids graduate, so they waited in line, and then you got to wear those gowns and caps, and of course that's really hot.
It was exhausting. I couldn't breathe. Like, my chest hurts.
How was it in there with the heat?
Terrible. It's bad.
Yes, students in full caps, gowns, drenched as they walked out of Hinchcliffe Stadium as the announcement was made to end the graduation early. So they didn't even call the names of a lot of the kids. They just said, okay, you're graduated, because they wanted to get people out there. So all of a sudden, cops roll in, EMTs, they bring water and ice because all kinds of people start passing out.
There was people fainting around us.
We've just been advised that we have to close out the graduation.
Again, who is the idiot, because really you have to call them what they are, who said, let's go on with this graduation, even though it's going to be 97 and sunny at the moment your kid's walking across the platform. Let's bring grandma in when it's 100 degrees. Here's the mayor of Paterson. I don't know where the blame lies, at the schools, at the mayor's office.
You had 50 people who needed treatment on the scene.
50.
And 9 individuals were transported to the hospital.
50 people, 9 taken to the hospital. Well, I mean, is anybody shocked by that? So of the 5 schools after the afternoon ceremony, only students from East Side High received their diplomas. But again, I asked the question, who is the idiot, the dope, the dummy that said, let's do this graduation outside in 97-degree heat instead of waiting a couple days or doing it inside somewhere? 507, traffic, transit on the 7s. Good morning, Joe Nolan.
And I think that place has natural grass, too. I don't think it's an artificial surface there because, it's baseball. But can you imagine what it must have been like on those artificial turfs?
Yeah.
Oh, probably 140 degrees.
And, the poor parents, they're like, okay, I guess I'll go because they want to see their kids graduate.
Yeah, I know when Westfield High School has a hot day or a rainy day, they move it to the Armory, which isn't really that much better. It's just as hot in there as it is out, but you don't have the sun beating down on it.
Yeah, just like, really? Like,
crazy.
This is the people running the schools? You really start to question who's running the place.
Right. I mean, that was ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
WABC News Time 509. The heat and humidity, no doubt, will play a factor in primary day, which is today. In 50 minutes from now, the polls open across the city. The Democrats want to be mayor making their final pitch to voters on Monday yesterday ahead of primary day today. In Manhattan, Zohran Mamdani was out hoping to convince voters he should be the next mayor, saying that he'd make the city more affordable. And this comes after that new Emerson College poll that finds he could actually win the race and beat Andrew Cuomo.
That late poll from Emerson College projects 33-year-old Queens Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani with a win over former Governor Andrew Cuomo after all 8 rounds of ranked choice voting. The Cuomo campaign calls the result an outlier. The poll's director noting that whatever the results Tuesday, Mamdani's first-round polling went from 1% to 32% during the campaign, while Cuomo's numbers stayed the same throughout. If no candidate hits 50% after the first round of vote counting Tuesday, the results will be determined July 1st. Andrew Whitman, NBC News Radio, New York.
Yeah, you have to look at that story and just sort of be amazed by it. Mamdani at 1% in February when he jumped into the race. 1%. And now, at least the Emerson College poll says he has a shot of winning this thing. So Mamdani in Manhattan yesterday trying to shake every hand he could, get people out to vote.
Right now, we're on the brink of toppling a political dynasty. New Yorkers are tired of having to worry each and every hour of each and every day of whether they can afford to live here.
Brad Lander, who has cross-endorsed Mamdani, is looking to primary election day enthusiastically. He was in Brooklyn yesterday talking about that Emerson College poll and the fact that Andrew Cuomo could potentially lose.
Thrilled to see a poll result that says Andrew Cuomo won't be our next mayor. Andrew Cuomo was a corrupt and abusive governor. He is running a corrupt and gross campaign. He would be a corrupt and abusive mayor.
The governor at a rally yesterday with union supporters, the ones he hopes will push him over the finish line and get people out to vote. Here he was saying Mamdani has no experience and shouldn't be anywhere near City Hall.
The mayor of the city of New York is the CEO of one of the largest corporations on the globe. This is not a job for a novice.
Okay, it's going to be a really interesting primary day. 35,000 poll workers will be assisting voters. There's 1,200 polling sites across the 5 boroughs. The board is responding to this extreme heat. So they're going to hand out fans to people who are waiting in line. There'll be water as well. They promise that the polling stations will have air conditioning, so you'll be okay when you're inside. 385,000 people cast ballots during the 8 days of early voting. The thought is a lot of those votes went Zohran Mamdani's way. So polls are open in 6 o'clock, so in about 50 minutes from now, and they'll stay open till 9 o'clock tonight. Now, make sure you're here at 9 o'clock tonight for a very special edition of Cats and Cosby, an election night version of Cats and Cosby. It begins at 9 o'clock tonight. Of course, they'll have all the results and no doubt probably talk to some of the candidates before the night is over as well. 5:12. President Trump says Israel and Iran agreed to a ceasefire yesterday. It seems that ceasefire's already been broken, but here was the announcement from Vice President J.D. Vance confirming the news yesterday.
Well, we were actually working on that just as I left the White House to come over here, so that's good news that the president was able to get that across the finish line.
Now, the White House was celebrating this news yesterday, the fact that the U.S. had obliterated Iranian nuclear program without losing a single American life. The president going to his social media platform saying complete and total ceasefire. They're saying that the 12-day war was over. God bless the world.
Iran was very close to having a nuclear weapon. Now, Iran is incapable of building a nuclear weapon with the equipment they have because we destroyed it. Is to build a long-term settlement here to where we can have peace in the region, where our regional allies and, of course, the American people most importantly can be secured. We have to talk to Iran and, of course, to Israel about what the future holds, because while we have obliterated the Iranian nuclear program, our hope and our expectation is that they're not going to try to rebuild that program. And I think that's what the president is really trying to figure out here.
Yeah, so lots of excitement over this announcement.
Knock on wood, having a single American casualty obliterated the Iranian nuclear program.
Yeah, that's all great, but Israel now saying this morning, at least 5 people killed in Iranian attacks in the southern part of Israel. This was after this complete and total ceasefire was announced. Israel's military says that rescue services went in early this morning during a barrage of missiles that came from Iran. One person they think is still trapped in the rubble. This wave of missiles sending Israelis to bomb shelters this morning for about 2 hours. And Iran's foreign minister says that as long as Israel stopped its attacks by 4 a.m. Tehran time, they would halt their own. But it seems that they have broken that promise already. It's unclear what the response will be, but Israel's prime minister yesterday was confirming this ceasefire. This morning, he's saying, no, this might be over already.
In his announcement, Netanyahu thanked the United States for its help in going after Iran's nuclear facilities and said the goal of eliminating Iran's nuclear and ballistic missile threat had been achieved. President Trump first gave word of a ceasefire deal earlier on Monday. I'm Mark Mayfield.
Yeah, but again, it looks like that ceasefire has been broken. Of course, we'll continue to follow this story all morning long. 5:15, let's head over to the 77 WABC Sports Desk. Good morning, Justin Ella.
Good morning, Noam Layden. Start here on the diamond in Cincinnati. The Yankees hit the road to get walloped by the Reds in the opener of a 3-game interleague series, losing 6-1. Aaron Judge accounted for the Yankees' only run with his 28th homer. Cody Bellinger had 3 hits. It was only the second time in 14 games that Yankees pitchers allowed 3 or more earned runs. New York came in with a 1.99 ERA since June 10th. New York went 0 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Right-hander Alan Winans made his MLB debut after a strong first 3 innings. He unraveled in the 4th, allowing 4 earned runs and taking the loss. Game 2 of this 3-game series is on tap tonight at Great American Ballpark out in Cincy. Carlos Rodon scheduled to pitch for New York in what will be a 7:10 p.m. first pitch. As for the Mets at home in Queens, they continued their losing ways in the form of a 3-2 loss to the Braves in the opener of a 4-game series against Atlanta. Juan Soto hit a 2-run homer that pulled the Mets within 1, but he struck out against left-hander Dylan Lee with runners at the corners to end the 8th. Nimmo walked with 2 outs in the 6th, and Soto drove a sinker into the left center stands for his 17th homer of the year. Then 8th in 21 games this month, the Mets went 1 for 11, with runners in scoring position and stranded 11 runners overall. Mets starter Paul Blackburn struggled and took the loss, giving up 3 runs over 4 2/3 innings. New York has dropped 9 of 10, including a 3-game sweep by its NL East rival in Atlanta last week. They are now a game and a half behind Philadelphia in the division. Game 2 of this 4-game set is tonight at Citi Field. The Mets are expected to counter with Frankie Montas, returning from the IL to start for New York in what will be a 7:10 p.m. first pitch from Queens. That's your...
Can I ask you something?
Yeah.
So, at the beginning of the season, they moved some of the baseball games because it was too cold. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Did they ever do that because it's too hot? Because it's going to be like 90 degrees when that game starts.
I can't remember a time when they moved the game because it was too hot. Sometimes you do see guys leave the game, because of overheating or whatever it might be. But they usually get checked up on by the training staff and are good to go down in that clubhouse. I've never seen them stop a game and postpone it or prematurely postpone it before the game had even started because of heat. No, Layden.
I can't imagine.
At least locally. I'm not sure,
Right.
maybe out west, if it when it gets really, really hot, out in, places like Arizona and stuff like that, maybe it's happened, but I don't think so here in New York.
I would think the fan experience wouldn't be so great tonight.
No, but listen, it's been 100 degrees here in New York City before, and they played baseball games.
That's true.
So, it's not unforeseen, but it will be hot out there. So if you're a New York Yankees ball player or you're a Mets ball player, or you're planning on attending these games, especially at Citi Field tonight, which is in Queens, you definitely want to stay hydrated. Have those beers, but work water in every now and then. You know what I'm saying?
1 beer, 1 water, something like that?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That's your Sports Gnome. I'm Justin Ellick, 77 WABC.
WABC News Time 5:20. Democrats still trying to figure out whether the president did something legal when he went into Iran. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries says President Trump broke a promise he made to stay out of foreign wars. The New York Democrat criticizing the president's decision to launch that attack on Iran without first getting approval of Congress.
The use of military force, which is offensive in nature, must be approved by the House and the Senate. Donald Trump and the administration chose to ignore the Constitution. And so they're going to have to come before Congress and explain their justification. What is your plan to avoid another foreign war? A promise you made. A promise that Donald Trump made to the American people.
Now, amid that and the ceasefire that seems to have broken apart this morning, you still have these demonstrators that are showing up who are anti-war demonstrators, Times Square, across the country,
We're not going to be fooled. We are anti-war. We stand with the Iranian people, and we want to prevent more death, more destruction, and we refuse to get pulled into another global war.
It's still too early to know how much the conflict in the Middle East will impact prices at the pump. I mean, the thought is it's going to be a temporary thing, especially if they can get the ceasefire back on track. Crude oil was up about $15 a barrel from May prices, but they had already started to rise last week to their highest levels since January because of the escalating tensions between Israel and Iran.
What we see in the crude oil market is really going to depend on how things play out in the next couple of days. If there are more attacks, then there's going to be more concern and volatility in the market. If diplomacy takes charge, then I think you'll see things temper down.
Yeah, that's the AAA's Mark Jenkins, who says the 16 cent a gallon spike in some places over the past week was more because of the natural cycle of competition, and fluctuation in prices are very fluid now. And he says maybe not so much to do with what's going on in the Middle East.
I think by the end of the day today, if there is to be any kind of hike, then we might be seeing it by the afternoon drive home.
Yeah, okay. 5:22, when you always see a little bit of a spike in the summer season anyway. The Supreme Court is allowing the Trump administration to deport convicted criminals to so-called third countries, even if they have no connection to those nations.
It puts a hold on a federal judge's ruling that said that those being deported should have a chance to bring claims that they would be at risk of persecution or death if sent to the countries. All three liberal judges on the court dissented. The White House can now send the migrants to places like South Sudan. I'm Mark Mayfield.
5:22, we've seen Democrats wanting to visit these ICE detention centers across the country, see how things are inside. Republicans doing the same thing, by the way. Congressman Carlos Jimenez continues touring detention centers. Last week, he paid a visit to the federal detention center in downtown Miami. He said the conditions there were adequate. He had a similar reaction to the detention center in Central Florida yesterday.
It's not the Ritz, but I can tell you that there's nothing going on in there that would be cause for alarm.
So he says for 100 people detained there are 6 toilets, 6 showers. ICE standards call for a ratio of 12-1 when it comes to toilets. The standard is 14-1 for detainees for showers. So that's why they're checking on all this.
Well, in 100 people, you'd have 6 toilets and 6 showers. People are saying that there aren't adequate bathroom facilities. There are adequate bathroom facilities. There's shower facilities. They're fed 3 times a day.
Yeah, so he says so far what he saw, what he liked in Florida yesterday.
It's not something you would say was inhumane or something that you wouldn't see in any other detention facility.
And he says, look, at the end of the day, it is a detention facility. 5:24, the one person still missing following that deadly boat accident on Lake Tahoe over the weekend. 7 of the 10 people on board were killed when this 27-foot vessel capsized near D.L. Bliss State Park Saturday. Jason Mack, who's from Lake Tahoe, says large waves caught people off guard.
I've been here a long time, and I've seen 4 to 6 foot waves, but I think it was, the waves were like 8 to 10 feet.
Wind gusts were gusting about 30 miles per hour in the area at the time of that deadly accident Saturday. Somebody who was on the scene. The lake's temperature had also dropped to just under 60 degrees. So Coast Guard officials continue to look for that one person who's still missing. 5:24. On Monday, 2 more groups in Venice, Italy, revealed another large banner protesting the upcoming wedding of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos and Lauren Sanchez. Monica Nelson has more on the story.
It was unveiled in the iconic St. Mark's Square, and it reads, "If you can rent Venice for your wedding, you can pay more tax." The groups are Greenpeace and the UK-based collective Everyone Hates Elon. The groups issued a joint statement saying the wedding ring alone cost over $5 million. And as governments talk about hard choices and struggle to fund public services, Jeff Bezos can afford to shut down half a city for days on end. Bezos has pledged to make some notable charitable donations. Venice's mayor calls it the wedding of the century and expects the city to bring in up to $34 million to local businesses.
But some locals not happy. They're saying to shut down half the city just so they can have that wedding. A rocket carrying the cremated remains and DNA samples of more than 150 were successfully launched last night.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1, ignition. And liftoff of Falcon 9. Go SpaceX, go Transporter 14.
It's
part of the mission of Celestis, a Texas-based company that sends the remains of loved ones, celebrities, and pets into space. The launch from California's Vandenberg Space Force Base saw the remains aboard a European capsule blast off atop a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. The plan is for the remains to orbit the Earth before eventually splashing down in the Pacific Ocean, where they'll be recovered and returned. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
526, the number of abortions in the U.S. is going up again.
According to data from the Society of Family Planning, in 2024, abortions totaled 1.14 million, despite years of bans and restrictions on reproductive care. The report found abortions delivered via telehealth have jumped significantly since Roe v. Wade was overturned, but the majority of abortions still happen in person. Abortions delivered via telehealth are covered by SHIELD laws, which provide legal protections to clinicians who offer abortion care to patients in states with restrictions. I'm Tammy Trujillo.
It's the 77 WABC News Hour. Talking the news with Noam Laden. All the news you need to know with Joe Nolan, traffic, Justin Ellick, sports. And now, Talking the News with Noam on 77 WABC.
Yes, that's me. Good morning. It is Tuesday, June 24th. Your forecast from the 77 WABC Weather Center. Sunny, hot, and humid today. The high here in the city is going to be 103. Tonight and overnight, clear, low 81, and then just one more day of this heat wave where it's really hot. Sunny, hot, and humid, high 97. If you're walking out the door with us right now, it is 79 and clear in Scarsdale up in Westchester County, 80 and clear in Bloomingdale over in New Jersey, and it's 80 and clear right outside our Midtown studios. We're looking at the numbers that continue to come in of the power outages, at least across the city. Con Ed, for the most part, has been able to keep the power on, but 12,000 of its customers went the night without a fan or an air conditioner to cool them off. They're trying to work what's wrong. The power outages, the vast majority of them, yesterday they were in Queens, but now it seems that it's about 8,000 on Staten Island, about 2,000 in the Bronx, and about 1,300 in Queens. And of course, it makes for a miserable night of sleeping, people feeling hot and exhausted. But when you saw people out on the streets yesterday, there's still people out there exercising, getting things done.
So I've been walking and doing like a little bit of cardio and stretching, so don't go near me.
And we checked in with one of the local hospitals, and they said, yeah, they saw this pretty big uptick in people coming in with heat exhaustion who thought they could handle the heat, and they weren't able to.
Cramps, feeling extra exhausted can become more severe. You might feel like your heart is racing.
And, of course, you don't realize it until it's too late. Now, they can cool you down once you're in the hospital, and usually it works out okay, but they're just warning people. It does happen, and they saw big numbers yesterday, people who were just overwhelmed by the heat.
In its most extreme cases, heat stroke can be accompanied by alterations in consciousness, not acting like yourself, having seizures.
Yeah, so the key is just sort of, take it easy if you can. 5:39, I'm getting a message on Instagram from a woman named Loretta who lives in Paterson, New Jersey. Who was one of the people at Hinchcliffe Stadium in Paterson yesterday for her granddaughter's high school graduation. She says parents, students begged the school system to call the graduation off because it was way too hot. They said, wait a couple days or find an indoor space to do it, but they did not. And so a number of people passed out waiting in line in the scorching heat to enter that venue yesterday morning.
I just noticed you were in the ambulance. What happened?
I had an asthma, like a little asthma attack and everything. They put me in. They gave me the breathing machine. They wanted to take me. I don't want to go because I don't want to miss my son's graduation.
Yeah, I mean, that's what it was. These people said, okay, I'm going to wait in line, even in the scorching heat, because they wanted to see their kids or grandkids graduate. Paterson's public safety director, Jerry Spezial, says that numerous EMS personnel were at the stadium as people started passing out from the heat and were taken for treatment. 5 people, actually it was 7 now. Let me update that number. 7 people hospitalized for dehydration during that graduation. They were going to have 3 or 4 different graduations during the the course of the day. At some point, they cut it off because so many people were passing out in the heat waiting to watch their kids graduate.
They didn't call nobody else's name. They canceled it. Oh, no. All they did was say congratulations to everybody. East Side didn't even finish going through. Everybody should have graduated last week while it was cool because y'all knew this heat wave was coming.
I think we should have had an alternative.
Yeah.
What, all these high schools we got, we should have had an alternative.
Of course. And this woman telling me that this teachers, the parents, students asked for that alternative before yesterday's graduation, saying, why are you holding it on the hottest day of the year? Patterson school system did not return our email asking why they chose to hold the graduation ceremonies yesterday. Just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. 541. On the eve of primary day in New York City, this new poll came out that hints at the possibility of a major upset in the race for mayor. Zohran Mamdani, the 33-year-old assemblyman from Queens, who was at 1% in the polls back in February, in this new Emerson College poll, he would come out on top after ranked choice voting. That would be maybe just one of the biggest upsets of all time in New York City politics, especially against Andrew Cuomo, of course, who's such a well-known name. The survey polled likely Democratic voters and was conducted from June 18th to June 20th after the second mayoral debate. So you can imagine Zohran was energized by this poll as he was shaking hands here in Manhattan yesterday.
New Yorkers are hungry for a new kind of politics. Time and time again, we've been told that our campaign has a ceiling. We were told it was 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 25, 30. Now we're seeing, actually, there is no ceiling to this movement because this is a movement for each and every New Yorker. It's a movement that speaks to the facts. This is the most expensive city in the United States of America.
The Cuomo campaign quick to send out an email dismissing that Emerson College poll. They say it's an outlier. They say every other credible poll in the election cycle, including two that were released last week, have shown Governor Cuomo with a double-digit lead over Zohran Mamdani. In fact, in a Marist poll that was published last week, Cuomo broke 50% threshold in the seventh round of ranked choice voting. Cuomo was out yesterday holding a rally with union workers, and he says Mamdani does not have the experience to run New York City.
Mr. Mamdani was a legislator of 2 terms, only passed 3 bills, but did 1 million tweets. We have to come back to that basic question. Who has the competence to manage the city of New York?
Now, Brad Lander, who is third in most of these polls, he's cross-endorsed Mamdani, so they're telling their supporters to either put Mamdani first and him second or the other way around. He thinks that Cuomo potentially could go down to defeat.
We've been saying all along there's a vision for a better future, and it is not Andrew Cuomo, and voters are starting to hear that message.
Now, unless one candidate wins 50% of the vote tonight in the initial round, the results won't be determined until July 1st, after the Board of Elections calculates the ranked choice voting stats. This is the first time, if I'm not mistaken, I'm trying to think if there was another, where this will really play out, this ranked choice voting, in a way that New Yorkers have not seen before. So today, 35,000 poll workers will be assisting voters at a little over 1,200 polling sites across the 5 boroughs. Of course, heat, as you've heard all morning, is a big issue today. People don't want to stand in line in this heat. So what the board says, in this extreme heat, they will have poll workers handing out fans and bottles of water in some places. They've also been told by Con Ed and the power companies that they'll do everything they can to keep the power supply on in these polling stations. And what we also heard from the board is that Sunday, which was the final day of early voting, 55,000 people came out to vote. So the final number of early voters in those 7 days of early voting, 385,000, which was a huge number, double what it had been the last couple elections cycle. So polls open 15 minutes from now. They close 9 o'clock tonight. And make sure you're here at 9 o'clock tonight for a special election night edition of Katz and Cosby as they go through all the numbers in all the races across New York. All right, 5:45. Let's head over to the 77 WABC Sports Desk. Here's Justin Alec.
Thank you, Noam Layden. We'll start here on the diamond out in Cincinnati. The Yankees hit the road to get walloped by the Reds in the opener of a 3-game interleague series, losing 6-1. Aaron Judge accounted for the Yanks' run with his 28th homer. Cody Bellinger had 3 hits. It was only the second time in 14 games that the Yankees pitchers allowed 3 or more earned runs. New York came in with a 1.99 ERA since June 10th, and the Yanks went 0 for 12 with runners in scoring position. Right-hander Alan Winans made his MLB debut after a strong first 3 innings. He unraveled in the fourth, allowing 4 earned runs and taking a loss. Game 2 of this 3-game series is on tap tonight at Great American Ballpark in Cincinnati. Carlos Rodon scheduled to pitch for New York in what will be a 7:10 p.m. first pitch. That's for the Mets at home in Queens. They continued their losing ways in the form of a 3-2 loss to the Braves in the opener of a 4-game series against Atlanta. Juan Soto hit a 2-run homer that pulled the Mets within 1, but he struck out against left-hander Dylan Lee with runners at the corners to end the 8th. Nimmo walked with 2 outs in the 6th, and Soto drove a sinker into the left center stands for his 17th homer of the year and 8th in 21 games this month. The Mets went 1 for 11 with runners in scoring position and stranded 11 runners overall. Mets starter Paul Blackburn struggled and took the loss, giving up 3 runs over 4 2/3 innings. New York has dropped 9 of 10, including a 3-game sweep by its NL East rival in Atlanta last week. They are now a game and a half behind Philadelphia in the division. Game 2 of the 4-game series is tonight at Citi Field. The Mets are expected to counter with Frankie Montas, returning from the IL to start for New York in what will be a 7:10 p.m. first pitch from Queens. That is your Sports Gnome, and I'm Justin Ellick on 77 WABC.
WABC News Time 5:48. Mahmoud Khalil, the Columbia University activist who was detained by Immigration and Customs Enforcement for more than 3 months down in Louisiana, sitting down with ABC News last night to talk about his time in custody, vowing to continue his right for what he calls Palestinian human rights. It's his first full-on interview since he was released from that detention center in Louisiana on Friday. He's back in New York, reunited with his wife and his newborn son. He talked a little bit about what it was like being arrested by those ICE agents back in March.
I felt like I was literally kidnapped. All the know your rights that I've indulged myself into felt like nothing, because at that moment ICE made it clear that you have no rights.
Now, his movement, sparked by the Israel-Hamas war that, of course, began October 7th, 2023, with that Hamas terror attack on Israel that killed more than 1,200. He said last night to the interviewer he's not anti-Semitic, would not want anybody anti-Semitic to be part of his movement. But he says he's no threat. He says he's peaceful.
Because I represent a movement that goes against what this administration is trying to do. They try to portray me as a violent person. They try to portray me as a terrorist, as some lunatic, but not presenting any evidence, not presenting any shred of credibility to their claims.
The White House would push back against that. First of all, they're appealing the judge's ruling that freed Khalil from that detention center in Louisiana. And the White House also says that Mahmoud Khalil distributed pro-Hamas flyers. Secretary Marco Rubio said that he created an environment of harassment towards Jewish students at Columbia University. And they will continue to try to get him back in that detention center and kicked out of the country. 5:51. New York City leaders are demanding that state leaders in Albany amend a law that allows some minors to avoid criminal charges for violent offenses. The Raise the Age law, which went into effect back in 2018, put 16 and 17-year-old offenders in family court instead of criminal court. And New York leaders say that's necessarily not a good idea.
The mentality on the street is that nothing happens to those under 18 who possesses or uses a gun. This is the biggest challenge for us right now, and it's an unintended consequence of the Raise the Age law.
Yeah, that's Bronx DA Darcel Clark, who says the law emboldens adults to give guns to teenagers because they avoid stiff penalties. NYPD Commissioner Jessica Tisch says since 2018, the number of shooters and shooting victims under the age of 18 has doubled. So the call comes as Clark, Tisch, and Mayor Adams announced this 208-count indictment yesterday against 19 gang members and associates, including 9 teens linked to a dozen shootings in the Bronx.
Since Raise the Age went into effect, the number of shooters and shooting victims under the age of 18 has doubled. It's unacceptable because it removed the criminal consequences that prevent teens from escalating violence until they or their rivals are either dead or facing adult sentences.
Yeah, so they're begging, they're asking, they're pleading with state lawmakers to amend that Raise the Age law. 552, out to Long Island, the days finally numbered for a fleet of aging LIRR train cars that have been in service off and on since the 1980s. I know riders will know which cars I'm talking about. The MTA Finance Committee has approved a $2.3 billion plan that would purchase 316 brand new M9A train cars. Of those, 160 will be headed to the LIRR, marking the beginning of the end of those M3 train cars. Some of those are not air-conditioned, and we've told a lot of them stink, too.
You did the best you can with what you got, but everybody's looking for improvement, and it's about time.
Yeah, so riders applauding the move. They say, okay, well, how fast are we going to see these cars?
They're paying a lot of money for monthly tickets, and then they get on these old clunkers that can go too fast, and there's no air conditioning on some of them. The toilets are smelling. You still smell the old chemicals from the urinals.
Yeah, fun ride. So when are these first batch of M9As expected to arrive in Long Island, on Long Island? It won't be till 2029, so that's a 5-year wait. It's a big win for community activists in Manhattan's Nolita neighborhood. One local lawmaker calling it a win-win.
An agreement's been reached that will save the Elizabeth Street Garden in Lower Manhattan and bring more affordable housing to the area. Mayor Adams says the city will permanently pause plans for redevelopment of the garden, with Councilmember Christopher Marte agreeing to support rezoning 3 sites in his district that would create more than 620 new homes. That's 5 times more affordable housing than originally planned for the Elizabeth Street Garden site. The first 2 sites are in lots right near the park, and the park will also expand its hours, making it accessible for more New Yorkers. Councilmember Marte calls that a win-win. James Flippin for 77 WABC News.
Down to the Jersey Shore, where a swimmer recovering in the hospital after being stabbed in the leg by an Atlantic needlefish. It happened Long Beach Island on Saturday at Barnegat Light Beach. Police say initially they thought the swimmer had been bitten by a shark, but later they said he had been stabbed by an Atlantic needlefish, which has long, sharp teeth. They're not big, but we're told they're aggressive and apparently incredibly fast, and they jump out of the water. So if they come into contact with your leg, you'll apparently feel it. Now, this guy's going to be okay, the swimmer, but it's just another thing to worry about when you go into the ocean down the Jersey Shore. While we're in New Jersey, one New Jersey realtor is running an experiment to understand the state of the housing market.
Our house is a very, very, very fine house.
Brendan De Silva recently listed a Newark house for a single dollar bill. He says he bought the house for $300,000 and spent another $100,000 in renovations. However, records show the 3-bed, 1.5 bath last sold for $30,000. Either way, De Silva says the $1 listing is not a joke, and offers are being accepted through Tuesday. The person who makes the highest bid is the offer that De Silva will accept, but he really just wanted to see what happens with the listing. I'm Liz Radabali for 77 WABC News.
All right, and we'll end with a heartwarming story of trauma, rescue, and reunion with family at a place better known for some of the ugliest headlines, Long Island's Gilgo Beach. Andrew Whitman has the story.
The story begins Monday night around 8:10 p.m. during an ordinary beach patrol for 2 Suffolk County Marine Bureau officers. People told them about ducklings stuck in a storm drain near Broadway, 9 baby ducklings, and a nervous mama waiting nearby. Officers John Rodriguez and Robert McCroskey took crowbarred a storm drain, rescued them all, then after a photo, reunited them with Mom. All swam safely away into the Great South Bay. Andrew Whitman, NBC News Radio, New York.
Thanks for listening to the News Hour with Noam Laden. You can hear the News Hour with Noam Laden weekday mornings at 5 on 77 WABC. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode so you never have to wonder.
What the heck is going on here?